Well, good morning and welcome to another episode of Unpublic with Citizen Stewart. Today is Thursday. We are one day away from my favorite day of the week, which is Freedom Friday, which will be tomorrow. We're going to have Naomi Shelton on the show, so please come by, watch, comment, join in, add to the flavor. Today, though, I have the infamous Twitter ninja Ray Ankrum, my colleague from the 8 Black Hands. Brother, how you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me. I don't know what we're talking about, but I'm sure it's going to be important.
Well, I saw you sent something around to me yesterday. It was an article that you were like, man, here we go again. And I should put it up on the screen so that people can see what we're talking about real quick here. Because today I want to make a case about ed reform and the ed reform. Which ed reform movement do you want to be in, if you want to be in any reform movement, or even not reform? Because I think reform is too polite of a word. I'm actually pushing for like new schools, new opportunities, new. So it's not even reform. It's actually abolition of one form of education and opening the door to educational pluralism, which means we can have a variety of options and choices for how we want to educate and be educated. But you sent me this yesterday. So the Dispatch, Frederick Hess and Grant D. Addison, how anti-racism is derailing efforts to improve. This is not a new comment or a new subject for me for this show. We've been talking about this for a while. We talk about race and racial equity and anti-racism generally all the time, and we've been doing that for a long time. More recently, we've had to talk about it because there is whitelash. There is a backlash to even having the conversation. Toya Jackson, good morning. See you. I see you. Toya, also Mama Toya in the chat there. Please share, like the show, get other people involved, and see who else can come to the discussion this morning. But anyways, going back to this effort, I just want to make a quick case about how we go off. I'm back. hit the button. Anyways, I was saying as I so rudely took myself out of the conversation. That I want to make a case that there is more than one education reform movement. Yesterday, I had Nate Bowling on the show. We were talking about all of the backlash to critical race theory in education in schools. And he said a couple of times, the education reform movement, and then he would talk about ed reformers. And he was very clearly talking about people like Rick Hess and Pondisio and others. And I didn't have room in the conversation to say, but that's not like the entire movement. That's like a section. That's a neighborhood. And it's like a neighborhood I don't like to go to of the ed reform movement. So just let me say this at the beginning. Education, so-called reform or advocacy or whatever you want to call it, the so-called movement or federation or co-federation, whatever you want to call it, has always concentrated on things like teacher preparation, induction, support, evaluation, curriculum and instruction, data and assessments, policy making, and the responsiveness of policymakers, governance at all levels, including school districts, school boards, whatever, educational pluralism, which is basically just school choice, and racial justice, equity, and progress, needing to make progress with certain groups. That's the mainstay of what we've called reform. That's the stuff, that's the meat, that's the guts of the whole thing. If we're talking about that, then we're talking about something that might get kids a better education. Who's teaching them? How are they teaching them? What are they teaching them? Where'd you come from? Where'd you get it? How's the curriculum? Is it aligned? Do you have any standards? What are the standards? Are they common? That's ed reform. That's actually what we're supposed to be talking about. But we can't talk about that when we keep looking at these stories like this one that you shared with me, Ray, yesterday. And I think you just did it just to get a brother mad is what I think you did. Really.
I think that we got to match energy, and I was talking to Reef about this. Is that man, when these stories come out, usually there's no counter narrative in terms of how Black folks interpret when we see these kinds of stories.
Yeah, I don't think that people know that it's part of a campaign. That's
Yes.
the part that I don't think that people know. Oh, look at this story. Oh, wow, anti-racism. Yeah, those schools sure are doing some wacky stuff. Boy, that's interesting. So, Rick Hess here says basically in all this, and he goes through, he hits on all the buttons. Wokeness is taken over, and woke education, and this wacky woke math, and they dare to talk about whiteness and deconstruct whiteness and whatever. So all the heroes in this are people like Erica Sanzi and conservatives and people who are on the kind of white rights, white grievance movement nonsense right now. And then all the kind of villains in this piece are the people who are working to make things more equitable, to be responsive to communities of color, to listen to them, to root out racism. That's a bad thing now. That's bad for education reform because I don't want to be associated with it. I don't want to be associated with it at all. And people associate because we're for charters, because we support school choice or whatever. They think we're one and the same. We have to do something. We have to do something to make sure that people know that we are for the real education movement. The real education movement is all that other stuff I said. This is the nonsense. What was your response? Did you respond to this at all? Did I miss it?
No, I didn't respond to it. Not yet. I think that we should do a collaborative effort in terms of addressing this, because it's not just one person that's writing it. This is, I think, co-authored.
Yeah.
And so I think that there should be some co-authorship from our camp in order to address some of these misnomers.
I mean, do you feel like we're going to get, if we don't do that, that we're going to get wrapped up in, like, people are going to conflate us with them?
Absolutely. That's the point. That's why I thought that it was important for us to have a rebuttal with the Pondicio article, is because I don't want people to like group me up with that camp, right? We're doing some really good work in these schools. We're looking at things through the lens of the oppressed and not the lens of the oppressor. And I think that's important when you're looking at history. Now, I'm a history major. I'm a history teacher for life, right? Even though I run a school, but for example, I just went into a class today, a fifth grade class, and they were talking about the Haitian Revolution, and they were comparing the Haitian Revolution to the American Revolution. And I had to jump in because I had to make sure that our kids, 80% Black and brown, were getting a full picture in terms of like how important that Haitian Revolution is to African culture. And I think that we got to be willing to tell the truth.
Mm-hmm. So was that you being woke this morning? Did you get woke? Did you have to go into class and be woke?
Not at all.
No,
man. I had to go into class and be real about the things that have been experienced by our ancestors in terms of like what it means to be oppressed. And so, there were white kids in the class. It wasn't my goal to try to make any white kid feel bad about what their ancestors did. I could care less about that, right? But like my thing is that if we're having conversations with these babies and we're telling them the truth, and then we're giving them the tools to critically think about what the truth is and what that may mean to them as people, that's the work, man. Like we can't like lie to them and like, coddle them to make it seem like, they were nice slave owners. Like, what are we doing here? I'm never going to be able to do that.
Well, listen, this is what I think. I'm calling it the vile education movement. Like what you just said to me is what we should be talking about. How do we teach these things? Why do we teach them? Who gets taught? Are we sensitive and conscious about who our students are in the classroom when we teach? Do we have a mixed classroom? Do we have a classroom of mostly racially marginalized individuals coming from communities that have been seriously the target of predatory behavior? Like there are different things you can teach, but as long as you are a smart educator who's really thinking deeply about these things and you're free to teach, then cool. But this vile education movement, let me just make this quick case to you and see, if you're gonna like think I'm crazy or not. But so we start with like we have Rick Hess's piece here.
Yeah.
And we think, wow, this might just be one piece, but it's actually more than one piece. This is an effort, an ongoing effort to put a chilling effect on classrooms and stop the teaching of anti-racist education, specifically because it makes white people uncomfortable and it dislodges whiteness at this of something as something at being at the center of everything. Now,
I got a question for you before you go there, right? Like, honestly, what's happening at Thomas B. Fordham Institute?
I mean,
I'm just gonna call it out.
About it. Yeah, tell them about it.
Yeah.
I mean,
what the hell is going on, man?
I mean, for people who don't know, he's asking about the Fordham Institute, which is an institute that seems to constantly want to interject into education reform non sequiturs, things that are not the primary focus that we should have on improving education for kids. What I started the show about saying the things around teacher development, curriculum standards, assessments, data, how we do schooling, how much choice and opportunity we have schooling. Those are the mainstay issues of people who are serious about improving education. But every now and then, the Fordham Institute wants to put out something about how single mothers are the big problem. They want to put out something that like, you know, a magazine with the vanishing black man on the cover and make the whole issue about fatherlessness. They want to put something out about how social justice warriors, a term, by the way, that came out of Gamergate, with a bunch of sexist, misogynist white male gamers who are attacking white female gamers and doxing them. That's where the term social justice warrior comes from, by the way. But it makes it all the way to a right-wing think tank into the normal kind of vernacular of a so-called prestigious institute. And they say that, you know, social justice warriors are ruining education reform. And so I'm glad you brought it up. You know, I don't have an answer for you, but they're not the only one. They're not the only one.
I listen. So every now and again, Bob and Corey, they do a podcast. I forget what it's called, but it's engaging to me, right? Because like I love hearing Corey talk about school choice because, you know, that's his thing, and he's one of the leading scholars in terms of like. And
you're talking about Corey DeAngelis.
So folks know. Corey DeAngelis, right? Yeah. So he's one of the leading scholars in terms of like picking apart why school choice is important and why funding should go to the family, right? And so like I'm always tuning in to hear him talking because I'm learning from him, right? And one of the things that he said when he was having this conversation with Bob yesterday is that I don't know enough about critical race theory in order to give an informed opinion. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what a scholar does, right? Yeah. As opposed to like, oh, well, you know, let me conflate two things that are CRT, critical race theory and culturally responsive teaching. Because I feel like a lot of folks are kind of conflating those two things because they really don't know because they're not doing the work, right?
I think this is the big difference between, so Corey also has a show that he does with Matt Nielsen.
Okay.
Who's very much on this. You're in this Twitter feed very much on this anti-CRT thing. The difference between libertarians and conservatives is that conservatives believe that there is a cultural right way for the world to be. And I almost look at my words there, a white right way for the world to be. So they want the Leave It to Beaver world that they know to be the world for everybody. Their worldview should be the view for everybody. The founding fathers were founding fathers. They weren't framers, or they weren't just merely some guys who came together and, you know, attacked Britain and created a country. They're like the intellectual fathers of all Western civilization and blah 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 blah, and that's conservatism. Libertarianism is don't tread on me. You do your thing, I do my thing. You see the world how you want to see it, as long as it doesn't interfere the way that I want to see it, that's fine. So there should be no libertarian, for instance, who supports the state outlawing an entire scholarship, an entire set of scholarship. Conservatives do that because conservatives are ideological blowhards. Libertarians don't do that because libertarians want to be free. They want liberty and they want to be free, right?
Yeah, free is good.
He said free is good. All right. Well, let me jump back because you jumped in with the Fordham piece.
I'm sorry.
No. This is important though. Like these think tanks. So 33 Republican bills have been introduced to attack specifically not trans people but trans kids. And their freedom and what they can do in schools. 33 states actually looking at anti-trans trans bills. The Campaign to Cancel Wokeness. Very good story in the New York Times. People should go and read it. It will give you kind of background of why all of a sudden, why is this such an issue? Why is there so much of a Republican kind of campaign? And this is a very good article. I'll tell you to go read. But, you know, in short, the article is basically saying that it's a ginned up effort to work to the base and to win elections is basically the attempt here. At least 12 to 13 states have either passed or introduced anti-critical race theory bills. So anti-trans bills, critical race theories bills, anti-critical race bills. At the same time that the Brennan Center tells us that 361 bills as of March in 47 states were introduced around voting, and 253 of those were restrictive bills, right? That there's actually more than that now. There's 55 that are moving in 24 states moving through. So we don't, you know, we want to clamp down on trans. We want to clamp down on people of color having a say in their schools and what their schools teach and how they get taught. We want to clamp down on them voting. I think one court case from years ago said that the effort to restrict voting was with surgical precision. They looked at all the ways in which Black people vote, and then they tried to put a roadblock in those specific places, in those specific ways. So it was a very surgical, purposeful. So let's stop people of color and trans people from having a voice, having participation, having anything to do with the curriculum, and so on. In Louisiana, they even had a bill that they were trying to end paddling. And if you listened to the floor response from the Republicans and the conservatives on the floor, you would have thought that paddling was just a normal part, like whooping a child is just a normal part of schooling. Man, stop it for a minute. Then we go to our side of the fence. We're still dealing with stuff like this. Teachers who tell kids that George Floyd was an effing criminal. Teachers who said that Breonna Taylor actually was asking for it because she dated the wrong guy. School assignments around things like, you know, slavery wasn't that bad, or let's teach you what was in the mind of the colonizers so that you can sympathize with the colonizers of Africa. You know, we're still dealing with that on our side of the fence. Gonna add another little ripple here. Christopher Rufo is one of the guys who's credited in that previous New York Times story that I showed as being one of the key people who has been pushing this issue around critical race theory. And you have to ask yourself, why is he so pressed? The wokest placed on earth, the courage of our conviction. All of these are about critical race theory, right? And affinity groups and ethnic studies. And, you know, some big Marxist plot, you know, here they want to get it out of the military, critical race theory out of the military. Notice none of this, like even let's just take that one, the critical race theory, let's get it out of the military. Notice he doesn't have anything to say about the FBI and CIA intelligence reports that say that the military has been infiltrated by white supremacists. No, the real problem is critical race theory in their mind. Why are they so pressed? All of these articles, what is up, dog? Why are you so pressed? Well, here's why I think, and I'm going to end here. I should have made this case at the beginning, Ray, but I just wanted to like to make this case, right? The Columbia Journalism Review took a look at how much of this energy is being put out there. And what they found was something that they call keyword squatting. They basically said that what this group is doing is they are taking a word like critical race theory and they are just flooding the market and flooding Google with content on it at 2 to 3 times more than any fair reporting on it, so that when you search for it, what you find is the story they want you to find.
Absolutely.
So they're basically taking anti-racism and things that they wanted to do away with all along anyways, and just flooding the market with all kinds of content, like tons and tons of anti-content. This is I want people to go and find this report. It's by Brandy Collins Dexter at the Columbia Journalism Review, how a racialized disinformation campaign ties itself to the 1619 Project. I'm going to stop there and just basically say, we have to stop being tricked by what we're actually seeing and what this actually is. We are in a fight for the truth. Like they're at war with us. All of this is a campaign plot. and we're at the wrong end of it, the losing end of it. I don't want to be part of that education reform world. I'll quit today. That's not the one that I want to be part of. How about you, Ray? Do you want to be on that side of things? Now, I know you're a Republican, bro. So
it's getting tougher every day. And then
how do you do it?
I don't know, man. Like, yes, I know yesterday was a really big wake up call for me when you see folks that are just like, all right, well, even though the truth is right in front of me, like truth is right there, and I just refuse to see the truth. It's kind of like, damn, Ray, what are you doing, bro? Like, because I January 6th was as clear as day to about 99% of folks that have the ability to kind of decipher misinformation or whatever. And so, to have folks that are saying, well, how do you know they were Trump supporters? And, did they have their voting cards out? Or how do you know they voted for Trump? And bro, I'm just like, what? I'm like, first off, right? It's like, if they were black, they would have been eviscerated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's start there, right? That's where we got to start. So there's a certain level of privilege that allowed these folks to be able to participate in January 6th, the insurrection, right? And nobody wants to look at that. Right. So, that's what critical race theory allows you to do. It allows you to paint a counter narrative to say, hey, well, what would have happened if these folks were black?
Mm-hmm.
And what would have happened if these folks were Latinx? Right. So, that's where I want to start. But then secondly, bro, I gotta leave. I gotta leave. The next time I'm in my home state, my voting state, I will get a card and switch over to being an independent.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's getting harder and harder as a person of color who isn't a bootlicker to actually stay within a party that only wants bootlickers, right? I mean, I'm just gonna be real with you right now. I've lost so much faith in my people who are still out here. For years, I identified as a conservative. I was always a libertarian, but have identified as a Black conservative. And for me, that was something different than what I see in some of the conservatives today. Many of the conservatives today, the ones who are going to end up in an Erica Sanzi blog post, are the ones who are going to be most likely to be on somebody's boot somewhere kissing it, because the bottom line is, they make no Black focused content. All of their content is focused at telling white people that they're right. Oh, the Black people are wrong and you're right. Tanji, what are you saying here? She said, please repeat the name of the article. And I think she must be talking about the Columbia Review article. Tell me if I'm wrong, Tanji, but it's how a racialized disinformation campaign ties itself to the 1619 Project. I will work to get the link into the comments that you guys can see it. And I see people showing up. Appreciate y'all for showing up this morning. Go ahead, Ray.
The thing that I want us to kind of talk about and kind of unpack is just like, when you say that the person in the blog post or whatever, I can't say the person's name because I don't want to. Even when I wrote about the person, I didn't name the person because I don't want the person to get any kind of clicks off me in terms of me even calling that name out. But this anti-LGBTQ plus agenda that these folks have, I feel like we gotta kind of stick here, and I think that we need to do some things in order to kind of make this more mainstream in terms of that attack, because that community usually matches energy. And so if they know that folks are coming for them, they usually are able to kind of, stop that in its tracks. And I don't know if very many of them are paying attention to this. And so I would love to, maybe bring a prominent member of the LGBTQ plus community on the 8 Black Hands in order to be able to kind of talk about this.
I mean, I definitely think we should be lifting up the voices of all parts of our communities that are going to be in our schools. We are supposed to be a school community. Don't you say that about your school sometimes? We're a school community, right? Yeah. So a community in some ways has a aspect that is quasi like a family. And that means, how do you deal with the person that is doing very well and the person who needs help? How do you deal with the person who is having depression and the person who is gifted? You have a community of people. These folks are antisocial. These folks are saying like we need an antisocial community that basically says there's one way to teach history. There's one version of Americanism that we all need to subscribe to. We don't need no gay stuff. We don't need no black stuff. We don't need that's the whole thing. Anti-trans, anti-LGBTQ, anti-people of color, having a say and having any power. Something as simple as ethnic studies. How is ethnic studies going to be a problem to you? Like seriously, I don't even know for you, Ray, but definitely we need to ask our friends in ed world who are siding with this or double clicking on some of these stupid articles. Why is this the right conversation to be having? If people want ethnic studies, let them have ethnic studies.
Well, so I'll say Matt's name because Matt doesn't annoy me as much as other people. So I will say Matt Nilsson. Shout out to Matt. So we engage each other. And one of the points that he's making, and Matt, correct me if this is not the point that you made, is that school choice pretty much gives you the right to have your kids learn in the environments that you want them to learn in. And I get that. And I'm 100% behind that. And that, I think that's our common ground, right? So like, if you don't want your kids to learn in a culturally responsive teaching environment, then that is your choice. And then you can allow your kids to go to whatever schools that are going to best benefit them in their growth and development. And I'm okay with that. But in the same breath, it's like we have to talk about the hundreds of years of the miseducation of our people due to them being in systems that have been indoctrined to teach us that being black is wrong, being a slave, slaves were happy, slaves were, and all of the things that kind of have us in the position that we're in, that we're not supposed to think about, because we should be thinking about the fact that, hey, we're free now, right? And I think that that's a load of bullshit. And it makes me think about, and it's gonna be controversial to some of the folks that are pro integration, is that what if separate but equal would have really been tried? What if we really have been given the opportunity to be separate but equal? Like, how would we be looking at education now if we were given that opportunity?
And what's your answer?
Bruh, I think we would be flourishing right now, man, because you wouldn't be thinking about, all right, well, so first and foremost, if separate but equal would have even been tried, right? We wouldn't have lost the mounds of talent that we lost. And I take it back to when you think about the slants, the transatlantic slave trade, right? I saw a meme and it was folks, they didn't just enslave people. They took doctors, lawyers, they took our elite from Africa in order to bring them here and enslave them, right? And so I look at it the same way in terms of Brown versus Board of Education. We took principles that were doing.
You know what, Ray? You're making me feel bad.
I'm sorry.
As a person who has some white in me, I feel bad, and I don't want to hear the rest of this lesson. I mean, you're just saying that one race of people took another race of people, and I think that's very divisive.
It's absolutely divisive. But here's the thing, though. Here's how you combat the divisiveness, right? Primary source documents. We bring in primary source documents, so you can't argue with the facts here. Yeah. Right. And so
you don't think you can argue with the facts?
Based off of being a Republican in America in 2021, you can't argue with the facts, but you shouldn't. And in a history class, it's hard pressed to see students arguing with facts, right? Yeah. And so, I think that's how history gets taught. You bring in primary source documents, and then you build a kid's capacity to think for themselves, right? You put those documents in front of them, and then, hey, you let them, you facilitate conversations, right? You're a facilitator of learning. Right. You're not and then these folks get critical race theory all wrong anyway. Right. It's so there's no way in hell that you can, unless you have a microscope inside of my mind or inside of my head, you don't know how I'm presenting material. You don't know what lens I'm presenting it through. Right. And so, this is just a shit show.
Yeah. I mean, I still haven't, and I talked to Nate Bowling a little bit about this yesterday. I still haven't been able to get across like what teachers do if really are you have a mixed classroom
Mhm.
and you're trying to like, you know, attend to the various different things that kids are bringing to class, like, you know, their home life, their race, their racial background, their culture. I mean, imagine having a class where you've got the MAGA kid sitting next to the Black Lives Matter kid,
Mhm.
and you're having to teach a lesson. I still don't know 100% how teachers kind of thread that needle without somebody getting their feelings hurt at some point. But we don't have a big ass movement going to state houses passing laws that say that teaching BLM studies will be the way, the only
Right.
way, you know.
Right.
You know.
Right. But I think it gets you into that piece of like, you know, when you think about like how you teach a class as a teacher, right? When you think about like how you teach a class, you have your highs, you have your middles, you have your lows, right? And so the majority of teachers that are teaching, they teach to the middle. And so a lot of times the lows get they don't get what they need, and then the highs, who are really gonna go to college and be great and do all those things themselves without any help from the teacher, they're left to kind of fend for themselves. And so I think about that when you're thinking about creating like a harmonious equity-based classroom, right? It's like you're gonna have folks that are from different ethnicities and from different cultures. And so the thing that you need to do probably is like highlight every culture, right? So like you highlight every culture, then, and you're having like cultural nights and whatnot in which people can come in and they can learn about other people's cultures.
Oh
Then
Lord, stop it, Ray.
it lends to them being more respectful of that person's culture. So it's like,
so you talking about like tamale night?
Nah, knock it off.
You talking about tamale night?
Knock it off. I mean, and that's but no, I mean, when I talk about culture nights, I'm not just talking about just the food, bro. I'm talking about just like letting people have the opportunities kind of present what makes them great.
Yeah.
And doing it from that nature. Not even if we could even take food out, because you know how I feel about potlucks. If we could take food out and just focus on just like the richness of everyone else's culture, I think that's how you make society better. Because a lot of people, they make these misinformed statements about folks and don't even know who these people are, because they don't give them the opportunity to kind of talk about their culture and who they are.
Yeah. I see Michelle Johnson put here, I watched a kid read a letter from Thomas Jefferson about shielding his slave Cook up in the White House from engaging with free blacks in Washington, D.C. He didn't want her getting any ideas. Primary sources and a critical lens scare the hell out of power. You know, we should put power in quotation marks. I don't want my kid reading that letter. Thomas Jefferson was a great man. He was a great white man who did great white things for great white people. And I don't want my white kid learning that his great white hope was a sociopath pedophile, much in the tradition of many of the people that are in the party that claim him today. I'm sorry, not my party, but your party. It seems to be like a pedo party. Like, so your big ass pedophilia party doesn't want me teaching that Thomas Jefferson was a pedo, because he was a great white man. He did great white things. I mean, you see how circular this can get. Like this, what this becomes is a white child protection movement. A movement basically to say, we as white moms, we as white mommy bloggers who write white bloggy things to white bloggy people, don't want our white kids encountering any of that colored stuff that y'all want to do, any of that colored transy stuff that y'all do, right?
Yeah, because when you think about it, yeah, it is. I mean, if you think about LGBTQ plus in their color spectrum, and then if you think about black and brown folks or whatever, like it is definitely heavily based off of just anti-color. Like,
yeah.
So bro, we just gave them a name for their movement. You know, that shit is an anti-color movement.
Anti-color. I prefer the vile education movement because I think they're disgusting. I think it's a disgusting, needless movement. We don't need it right now. Let me ask you a couple of questions and it'll make my point for me. Teacher preparation, instruction, support, and evaluation. Have we figured that all out yet?
Absolutely not.
No, we haven't figured it out yet. Really interesting.
Not even close. Haven't even really scratched the surface.
So we haven't scratched the surface on how we prepare people to teach the generations of kids that we want taught, and how to induct them, support them, and evaluate and monitor them. We haven't figured that out, really. Nope. Do you think school districts have a strong handle on curriculum and instruction?
Absolutely not. I think that, in order for us to say definitively that a school district has a good handle over curriculum and instruction, you'll start to see standardized test results that kind of mimic that, right? So like if I'm
Wow.
going into a school district and like I'm seeing 70% of students that are proficient in reading and math, and then when I go to the breakdown categories of like, well, how are the Latinx kids doing, and then how are the Black kids doing? If those Black kids and Latinx kids and the Asian
You can't break it down, Ray.
but I'm saying,
you can't disaggregate them. Now I feel bad. Now you're making me feel bad for doing well as a white kid.
But what I'm saying is that when everybody is doing well, then you know that the school system is working.
Yeah, equally well.
Right.
Then you know the system is having an equal impact on different kids, and that's not a big conservative belief. They don't believe in that really, but these other things that I mentioned, data and assessment. I mean, this is rhetorical. We know that data and assessment we haven't figured it out yet in a way.
Here's the pushback though, Chris. Right. So like, all right. We're talking about a critical race theory lens, and we're talking about culturally responsive teaching, and how we're anti-color movement, right? If you look at the teaching profession is 80% white, right? And so if we're railing against standardized tests,
God, stop it, Ray! Now you're making me feel bad again as a teacher.
If you're
a white teacher,
listen. Listen. This is a primary source document. I'm bringing in the data.
Good. All right.
In the data.
We don't need no data. It's about how we feel, bro. It's about how we feel. But keep going.
This is not my opinion. This is the data. If you have 80% of folks that identify as white in teaching, you mean to tell me that a teacher-made assessment is not going to be even more racist than an assessment that's developed by a psychometrician? I don't believe that. I don't buy that. Like I just don't, right? Because there's certain things that you can account for if you're making a test and you have a PhD in metrics that allow you to be able to measure certain things. Whereas if you're just a racist ass white person, then those tests are going to be what they're going to be. They're going to be racist ass tests that are not going to be good for Black and brown kids.
I think what's so ironic about that is too, and the teachers will be the first ones to say, but that standardized test that's been normed and has been studied and revamped multiple times through multiple panels of educators and of many who happen to be of color, that one is racist, not the one that the 3 million that we're going to devise in individual classrooms that are mostly run by white women.
We heard ourselves too, though. We heard ourselves in terms of like our knowledge. But I'm talking about Black folks. Speaking of Black folks, right? Like, we heard ourselves because like I saw this video of I think a black sister, and I don't even know if I can even call her a sister at this point, but like, so there was a Black woman that was talking about critical race theory in a school board meeting in Arlington, Virginia, or somewhere in Virginia. And so she totally confused critical race theory with culturally responsive teaching, right? And these folks they're just looking for material, right? And so like she more than likely is at like 1 million views somewhere or whatever, because she said the buzzwords. She gave these people whatever they wanted in terms of the moment in order for them to be able to click and do what they need to do. And then they take one person and then they try to make it seem like, oh, this is bipartisan, or this is Black and white people that are railing against this. And you have one person, like a very minimal amount of people, but that's what they do with the data. Is all they need is one. They got one, they're like, oh, well, and Black and white people agree. That's what they do, man.
And this is what I think is hilarious about that point. This is a great point. I see Tangi here says it was Loudoun County, Virginia, which doesn't surprise me at all. But a couple of the people that we may or may not have named in this particular show today have been trying to push the point. I'm hearing from lots of parents. I'm hearing from, and it's not just white parents. I'm hearing from all kinds. They're like, there's this mixed couple that I know, and there's these couple of immigrant parents that I know, and they hate this CRT stuff. Boy, it's bipartisan. Yeah. Stop playing with us. Stop playing with this. It's not bipartisan. That Columbia Review story, first of all, I showed you that the majority of this kind of anti-CRT hysteria, what Nate Bowen yesterday called a moral panic, just yet another white moral panic. Like, let's talk about other moral panics. there was a time when people thought that if you wanted to get rid of marijuana, you just told the public that jazz musicians were raping white women while they were smoking marijuana, and that became the reefer madness craze. And people don't know that. People don't know that. That's history. That's old. That's old. And that's why, like, if you have pattern recognition as a person of color and you have seen these kind of movements before, I've seen Rick Hess before, I've seen Robert Pondicio before, I've seen Erica Sanzi before. They have lived in every decade that we have had as the resistance to anything that looks like social progress for people that they consider to be racial or economic outgroups. They create outgroups on purpose. They say we are the norm, and then they antagonize white people and grievance culture to make white people think there's an emergency and we must act, and we must act now. The truth of the matter is there is nothing so urgent about the teaching of CRT in classrooms right now. First of all, half the people saying it don't know what it actually is. Those who do know what it actually is can't tell you where it is. The person in Tennessee who wrote the bill in Tennessee couldn't tell you one school in Tennessee that was actually teaching CRT. He resigned backwards to an anecdote about a 7-year-old white girl in the class who encountered a lesson about race that she didn't like. And that became the foundation of the bill in Tennessee. So this moral panic, this,
Bro, you know how much
campaign.
Wait, man, you know how much shit that our kids learn as African American and in the Latinx communities that we're just like, man, they taught this. Or so we should ban curriculum in general. If my kid is coming home telling me, Dad, we had to do slave yoga today, or Dad, we had to write, Dad, we had to write about the joys and benefits of being enslaved, and eating chitlins. we had to write about that. Man, listen. So
just so that people know that we're not lying.
So, but what I'm saying is that we have equal the ammunition to be able to go to these state houses and be like, hey, listen, we don't want this shit in our schools either. But yet we're not. We're giving grace.
This is the point, though, very important. Do we have the power to do that? When we're uncomfortable as people of color and trans people and the LGBT community and immigrants and these folks, when they are unhappy about a lesson, do they have white legislators who will run to state houses and start writing bills and pass them?
Absolutely not. You know that.
That's weird. Then it almost feels like that's white power. It almost feels like it's a white power movement. It almost feels like it's a white power movement to control the major institution that educates Americans to have it made in their own image. That is the vile education movement. The vile education movement is the movement that can't shut up about the superfluous side culture wars that they want to win because they're chauvinists and they can't see the world being any other way except for the world they want to live in. But they can't concentrate for 5 minutes on the real issues that we all better care about. You told me early in this conversation, you don't think that we have teacher prep ready or fixed. No. We don't have teacher induction fixed. That seems like a much bigger problem than trying to win a goddamn white versus black culture war because your little Susie encountered a lesson in class that she didn't like. Meanwhile, our kids are going to classes learning lessons about slavery and America's history and about current events that all are teaching our kids BS.
And bro,
and even to our children.
Even how they present the shit. Like even like you go into these lessons, you go into these classrooms and whatnot, and you hear these folks talking about things that they, first of all, that they're not really well versed on. So if you're teaching a lesson about race, you're teaching a lesson about history, read up on it, right? Before you start talking about it based off of your opinion, like really know what's happening in these textbooks or whatever, so that you can bring in primary source documents in order to be able to refute some of the bullshit that you know that these kids are going to question you about, right? And so, that's why I think that it's super important for us to kind of make sure that we're allowing kids to unpack their feelings and not just go home and like suppress their thoughts with their parents, even though that's good as well. But like I want spaces, I want creative spaces that allow kids to kind of get that energy out. And I think that we're creating that at our school in terms of like folks that are like, nah, well, that's not how it really happened, or that's not how I'm reading this, or that's not how I'm interpreting this subject matter that we're talking about, or whatever. And then allowing those kids to be able to express themselves without feeling like, hey, that kid is being disrespectful. No, that kid is activating their agency in order to let you know that, hey, this is some bullshit, and that's not how I'm reading it.
Yeah, I think there might be some real power to teaching our kids to be that kid that you're saying right now.
100%.
Yeah, teach them at home to actually be a problem child. A system of education that oppresses our people and oppresses our children doesn't deserve compliant, obedient children. They deserve problem children. We should be raising kids to be a problem in these systems, because they are going to encounter these crazy ass lessons. And there are no legislators. There are no Robert Pondicios. There are no Rick Hess's and American Enterprise Institutes with big ass endowments that are coming to save the kids that are sitting in classrooms right now that are feeding them cultural suicide, feeding them kind of academic poison, right? Under the guise of academic excellence. Oh, there's just one kind of math in the world. Really? Really? Tell me about it. Tell me about that one kind of math that just came from Western civilization, right? So just tell me about it so that you can give me the fuel to call you stupid and somebody who shouldn't be teaching my children. If you can't teach my kid the fullness of where math came from and how it developed over time and what nations contributed what to it, and you can't actually put them in that story too, because they belong in that story, just so you know. They invented half the shit half the shit you consider to be yours. My kids should be in the middle of that story because they're the rightful beneficiaries of the shit you've been claiming for years. But we can't have that conversation.
Yeah, but not just math though. It's like human civilization, bro. Like all humans come from Africa. They hate to hear that shit, but hey.
Right. You know what came from Africa? People. That's what came from Africa. People. So if anybody did anything, you better be teaching it through an African context at some point or not. But we don't have the power to legislate that. We don't have the Black power to legislate our way, right? This is where people who on the white side of the fence who want to push this white cultural chauvinism, this vile education movement that isn't for everyone, isn't democratic, isn't for everyone, isn't meant to be pluralistic, isn't meant to take in all views. They want to push one story, a single story about America, a single story about life. And then they want to term everything, oh my God, this stuff you guys are pushing is Marxism. I'm not a Marxist
at all.
Marx was another white dude, right? Like why you keep going back? Why are all your sources like, no, it's not Marxism.
Understand. So I don't get it, man. Like I saw one of his tweets that were this is Mark Matt again, because I'll say his name because he doesn't bother me as much again. And he was leading in the direction of critical race theory being that of old white dudes, or like whatever his narrative was in the tweet. And I'm just like, bro, yeah, that just tells me right there that you just really don't understand what you're talking about, and that you just want to talk just to talk. It's kind of like you're activating your base. It's kind of like being a damn a Trumpian. It is what it feels like. I'm not saying that that's what he's doing, but that's what it feels like. It's just like, all right, well, let me just activate my base based off giving them a whole lot of misinformation, because I know that they're not going to go and look it up and do all these things to challenge me that they should do. They're just going to double click.
Yeah. I actually feel like he is representative of the white cultural chauvinism that is decaying that side of the fence, and why they are useless to the real movement. The real movement in education, first of all, let's just put it this way. The majority of young people coming into public schools have shifted now. And who America is trying to educate has shifted. So any real education movement that wants to go back to yesterday and wants to enshrine the old white norm as the movement for education is a dying movement. It is late stage white supremacy. We should call it what it is. It has no place in any serious modern education movement. These people should stay within their think tanks and have their private dinners at the big fancy clubs where they have their private dinners, and they should talk this old white shit to each other. But those of us who really honestly care about a movement to educate America's children today, like the kids that we have coming in the classroom, can't do it with yesterday's playbook. We can't do it with these folks. What you laughing at, Ray? Jump in. What you laughing at?
Somebody's funding this shit, bro. Like somebody is like, yo, they get funding for talking that the things that they talk, right? And so we need to look at, you know, we need funding, man. We need our own schools. Bottom line, right? And so I think that this whole anti-critical race theory propaganda that's happening, this whole anti-LGBTQ plus narrative that these folks are trying to drive, just leads me to say we need our own schools. I'm not saying that these schools are going to be exclusively for Black and brown folks or LGBTQ plus communities. What I'm saying is that if they would want to, if white folks would want to be a part of that, then they're more than welcome. But we got to stop kissing their asses about being a part of the narrative that they don't want us to be a part of.
Somebody rocking, licking the boots. Anyways, you got to stop licking the boots. Anyways, this is what I think. I think that we need a movement. You just said, you hit it on the head. We need schools. We need pedagogy. We need to be defining for ourselves what an education is for our kids. And I think like, this is why I love having these conversations with you and all my homies. Like, number one, knowing that there are those of you who already have studied and trained and are already off to the races doing that, to me tells me that's where our movement starts. Let's start by lifting up our people that are already doing this work and trying to work hard every day. Not these blowhards sitting up in think tanks who want to pick a fight every 1 to 2 years because they're bored and because they want to have a fight about like some culture war item that actually fighting trans kids in 33 states and passing those laws isn't going to make one kid more educated. That is not an educational issue. That is not a thing that we need to be fighting over. That is a cheap and racist and homophobic and malevolent attempt to target a group of people and make them the scapegoat for like this pent up hostility that's been simmering in white America for a couple of decades now, because you think you're losing ground. So I just want to be very clear. We want a real education movement. We want a big tent, but we don't need in our efforts to have a big tent, we don't need a bigot tent. Right. And as a matter of fact, maybe we should create a separate bigot tent for the bigots who want to go to the bigot tent. The big tent needs to be the people that want to educate all Americans equally in a democratic fashion that takes that honors and values where people have come from, what their stories have been. That's the real education movement today. And the realist education movement should be things we shouldn't argue about. It will always be important who our teachers are, how they're trained, where they come from, what the curriculum looks like, how much do we know about instruction, what's the science behind what we're doing, what about data and assessment, how are we using it to make progress year over year over year, how many options and choices do parents have? That's the real education movement. That's the signal through the fog. Everything else is fog. All this, oh my God, I can't believe that you're teaching, Kendi or the 1619 project or any of that. None of that's the real movement. I'm going to put something on screen, Ray, because I wanted to start with you by saying, basically, like, this is why I love having backup. And I like having homies with you, because I can say these things, but people who are actually doing the work and doing the job won't let me be out here like looking like it's just like I'm just talking. No, there are those of you running real schools and real kids. Our homeboy Sharif El Mekki, who is taking a very positive approach to what our movement should be. Our movement should be about creating a pipeline of educators who can liberate our kids through the Center of Black Educator Development. If we look at what our homeboy, Dr. Charles Cole, is doing with energy converters, he is working with students and parents to find their agency within their communities. That should be part of a real education movement, something positive and productive that gets people into engaging in the democracy that we are all engaging in and paying for. That's part of the positive movement. My homegirl, Naomi Shelton, who is leading the Charter School Collaborative, a collaborative of leaders of color who are running schools, creating their own solutions in their own communities. This is the positive education movement that we all need. EdLock, the education leaders of color. And Ray, I know you're not in EdLock yet, but you're going to get there, bro. We're working on it. But education leaders of color, a network of people of color who are working on our own solutions, having each other's back, collecting our efforts together. Some of our ally organizations, not everybody's going to agree with me on these things, but Excel and Ed does amazing work. Look at this. They keep focused on getting inspired, getting solutions, getting empowered, getting involved. Under each of these tabs is lots of stuff that I consider to be the real movement. These aren't like, fringe thoughts that we should be thinking. It's the real meat of our movement. The Yes Every Kid campaign, to me, has the right language. There are no average kids. Yes, every kid. There should be a place for every kid to learn in peace. That's one of my messages. Our kids we should be open to all kinds of ideas about where kids can learn, how they can learn, new programs, new ways of learning, inside, outside, home pods, homeschooling, hybrid between the district and homes. This is the real education movement. And dare I say, my wonderful, beautiful team at Brightbeam, yes, this is part of the real education movement. That's right. Shining a light on the kids, the faces at the bottom of the well, making sure that we have a brighter future for every kid. This is the language that we should be working on. This is the real movement we should talk about. Lift up the voices of parents and students and community members and elected leaders to do what's right for kids. My homegirl over at the National Parents Union, uniting parents across the country to have equal power to the unions that are so powerful within the education system and public employees. Memphis Lift, our homegirl, Sarah, right? Sarah jumping out there, a plain speaking, plain dealing movement for our parents that live in some of the poorest zip codes to be powerful, not to be considered disempowered or needing somebody else's empowerment.
Bro, I know you saw that letter she wrote. That letter was amazing.
I love it. Open letter. Somebody should go Google it, from Sarah Carpenter. Open letter. Edunomics, I consider them as like top drawer in educating the public and learning how the money works in education, right? This is real meaty stuff, folks. This is heady, meaty stuff. This is the stuff that people should be talking about, not introducing hundreds of CRT bills or anti-trans bills, you idiots. This is the real work in education. This is the movement I want to be part of. SERPI, reinventing public education, data, research, stuff that makes the public smarter, helping the public understand things like COVID and what can happen, what could be. They asked the question a lot of what could we be doing? National Council of Teacher Quality, again, let's focus on the things that matter, preparing our teachers. 50 Can does really great work that I love. You don't have to agree with me on any of these groups, but let's just agree on this one part, that that the real education movement should be around things that unite us in improving the education that our kids are getting, not divide us around the fringe items that are really stupid wars to be fought. I don't want to be part of the vile education movement. I have to make a stand on this. Ray, I'm going to give you a chance at a final word, but here's my final word on this is we have to make a stand if we want to have a big tent and we want to share a movement. A big tent movement doesn't need a bigot tent, and we need to make sure that that's clear to everybody that we work with. I will not participate in anything that is anti anybody living their best life within our schools, having equal opportunity to an education, having equal say in how schools are run and what will be taught and what we should learn. But beyond that, also not just equal, because we've had an unequal past. We have to have justice. We have to have justice. We have to make up for lost time. We need educational reparations for what we have done to people of color for years and years and years, miseducating entire populations of kids with a whitewashed version of history that decentered them and made them feel like they were outside of the mainstream. We need to make up for lost time. And I'm not here to raise another generation of people who will be enslaved by the powers that be, who love to sit in think tanks to devise ways of how they're going to keep power over others. That's just not the education movement that I want to be in. I quit I resign from the education reform movement. This is my official resignation. You can kiss my black ass. I am not part of your education reform movement. I will be part of a real education movement. And for me, a real education movement is everything I just said. And it should be open to everybody. And I do care about Native kids, about Black kids, about immigrants, about kids of color of all varieties, and white kids and poor kids. Wherever you are, there should be a place for all of you. But I'm not going to put up with this vile education movement, miseducation movement that is rearing its head every 2 to 3 years in one of these really stupid and needless pieces that's being written to cause division and make us fight more than it's made to focus us on the real issues in education. That's my final word. Ray, I'm going to give you a final word.
I can't follow up after that. That's crazy. But what I will say is this, man. I want to shout out the homie Justin Cohen. He's been going out there and whatnot in terms of putting tweets out that are his thinking and the things that he's passionate about. He doesn't give a shit if people disagree with it because, you know, it's what he's passionate about. And I respect him for being one of the only people that are not just doing this behind closed doors, but are willing to have these tough conversations with folks that they disagree with out in open space. So shout out to Justin Cohen. And then also, man, I was serious about that debate between Pondicio and Justin. I think that would be a really good debate. I mean, I don't know necessarily if Robert is ready for Justin, but I think that it would be a good debate. I think it should be a bright beam, 8 black hands, Thomas B for Fordham Institute collaboration.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm ready for it, to tell you the truth, but yeah, I don't know if I'm ready for that one, but I would love to see it. Yeah. And I'm glad you bring that up because I do appreciate the people who jump in and actually push back, because there have been so many white friends and allies in Ed World who have said nothing as we're constantly being poked and prodded and attacked and trolled. Let's just be real. Let's call this what it is. This is intellectual trolling. We have whole ass think tanks trolling us on this issue, and they should leave us alone. They should just stop it, right? But we have white people who call themselves our friends on a good day, who lead other organizations, who either one, are not saying anything, or two, double clicking on those things, saying, you know, this is really thoughtful. Like, you know, this really adds something to the debate. I don't agree with all of it, but, you know, which only tells me who you are. It just tells me what side of the fence you're on. You have just joined the vile education movement. I am part of the real education movement. It's a big tent. You're all welcome as long as we can focus on the things that matter. But you just hit it on the head. People like Justin will jump out there and put themselves on the line so that we, people of color, aren't the ones having to constantly do the tiring thing, which is respond to this nonsense. It's tiring. It's over. It's done. Ray Ankrum, thank you, brother. I appreciate you for coming on short notice. Ray is always like willing to jump in on one of these debates, but half the times he starts them and y'all don't know this. Ray is messy. He starts trouble behind the scenes. So he's the one who sent me the article that got me all riled up about this. Again.
Yeah, we still need to address it. I think we need to write something.
All right. We're going to do it. To all you listening and watching, friends and fam who came here for breakfast, appreciate y'all so much. This has been another great conversation and talk. I'm very animated about this, as you can tell. I'm probably not going to let it go for a while because I don't think that we have enough people kind of pushing back on this one particular dangerous portion of our movement that is going unchecked right now, and it shouldn't go unchecked. We should stay focused on the real things. Tomorrow we're going to have Freedom Friday again. Sharif El-Mekki will be here, and we're also going to have Naomi Shelton because we're celebrating charters this week, and I haven't said enough about it. So tomorrow we're going to talk about that, and hope you can join us 9:00 Central every day. Come back, join us, tell a friend, click, like, share, help us promote the show. Appreciate you all. Have a great day, everybody.